Okay, this is going to be a really short video on how to change the culmination bolts so you can move your primary mirror forward to try to get focus with a DSLR camera without having to use a barlow. Um, just note that this does not change the focal length of the scope. It pushes the focus point of the light out of the focus tube farther. And it does mean that where I ultimately have mine at, not right this second, but once I put the longer bolts back in, it does mean that I have to use an extension tube with eyepieces. So I'm going to try to fine tune the position of my mirror to see if I can get it to, like, where the eyepieces will focus almost at the far, furthest out of the focuser, but that may or may not work out. But I've already got an extension that came with the scope, so if the trade-off for being able to get prime focus without a barlow is that I have to use the extension tube with an eyepiece, that's not a big deal to me. You'll have to make that decision for yourself if it's worth it or not. The other thing to note is that I did notice a lot of light coming in from the bottom. I have a street light right outside our driveway right at the street, and when I was out taking pictures last night, I noticed a lot of orange glow in all my photos. And I couldn't figure it out because I was shrouding the whole other, front of the scope and everything. And I eventually found out that it was reflecting off the ground and coming up through the mirror. So I had to put a cardboard box over the back of this. So in sometime in the near future, I'll probably be making a shroud to put over the back of the mirror cell here to block the light. So in order to remove the mirror cell, there's a lot of these little tiny bolts, little tiny screws. I think there's like 6 of them that go around the outside here. They're all Phillips head. You're just going to take those out. And once you do that, the mirror cell will come out. Be very careful not to touch the mirror. You don't want the grease from your skin getting on this. I should also note this is the first scope I've owned. This is the first scope I've modified, so do everything at your own risk. I'm not guaranteeing anything I do is necessarily the correct way. It's just how I did it. So you don't technically need to remove the mirror in order to get the bolts out. However, you would have to put the mirror excuse me, face down. You'd have to flip this thing over. I don't want to do that. So I feel it is safer to just pull the mirror out. Some people mark these so that they put the mirror back in exactly where they took it out. I've got marks on mine. I don't really know how much it matters or not. I don't know if at the factory they actually put this in a particular location or it just kind of gets put together, which is probably my guess. But so in any case, you take those 3 out, and when you put these back in, there's supposed to be a gap. You should be able to fit a piece of paper, I've heard, between this and the mirror, so this should not be pushing on the mirror. And I'll note that even with mine properly tightened down according to what I've read, I can still move the mirror a tiny little bit. These are just to make sure the mirror doesn't fall out of the cell is all they're for. So with that, pick up the mirror without touching it, and I'll lay that down. So this is the mirror cell. I've got the factory knobs back in. So the black ones are the culmination knobs, the white ones are the locking knobs. And the way that this thing works is these are spring loaded. See down there? So they're spring loaded. They're pushing this part. And then the locking knobs, all they do is they're pushing this whole thing forward and putting pressure on these is all the locking knobs are doing. So take the locking knobs out. Once those are out, now you'll see the mirror cell can move. So that's the spring. So the springs are pushing it forward just so that as you loosen them, the cell will move forward. So that's what the springs are doing. And then, like I said, the locking knobs are just pushing this whole thing out to lock it into place. So then you can take these out. Okay, so once those are out, pick that up, take the factory springs out. The culmination knobs had these little washers. I'll say I just went to Ace Hardware and I found that the thread size of these and the locking knobs is 6mm by 1 thread pitch. At first I almost thought it was 1/4-28 thread because these will thread into a 1/4-28 bolt. However, the washers that come on this washer will not fit on a 1/4-28 bolt. These will not fit on a 1/4-28 bolt, so I do believe these are 6mm by 1, and the nuts for that fit a lot nicer. So these are my new bolts, and you can see how much longer they are. They're probably about, I think it's like 3/4 of an inch, give or take a little bit, longer. And then my new springs, you can see the new springs are a lot longer. And once again, I got all this stuff at Ace Hardware. This isn't like anything official or anything I bought. It's just a couple bucks worth of, you know, bolts and springs from a hardware store. So having said that, just going to start these. Now I'd like to in the future find knobs that have the correct thread size I need, but I wanted to give this a shot. Couldn't find them that night, so I went with this. Not really too big of a deal. And as an added bonus, it means when I take the scope out of the base and I stand it straight up and down, I'm no longer putting that pressure on the knobs. It's on this whole flat base. I don't know if it matters or not. I kind of like that a little bit more, but it does mean in order to culminate this scope, I'm going to need this little Allen head, which, like I said, is not a big deal to me. So you're going to thread these in. How much, it's hard to say. It's going to be a little bit of a guessing game and some trial and error. Ultimately, what I'm going to do one night is go out and I'm going to put my camera in there, get focus on like the Orion Nebula is easy to see, or any bright star, the moon, something like that. And I'm going to pull the mirror back. So I'm going to tighten these bolts. I'm just going to keep tightening them, pulling the mirror back, and until I lose focus with my camera focused all the way in, and then at that point I'll back the mirror back out a little bit to give myself a little bit of room. But I want the mirror to be pulled in as far as I can. It'll give me the best chance of also getting focus with the eyepieces without having to use the extension tube. So I'm just going to put in the locking nuts. We'll say actually what I'm going to do, because I already done this once, I took it back apart. So right here, you can see, you'll see the end of the culmination bolt coming through. So you do have a finite amount of space. The threads end about halfway up. So I think this actually looks good, because before I had them flush, and I knew I could pull the sail back in a little bit. So that was about the same. So yeah, they're close enough right now. So I'm gonna leave mine there for now. Then I'll have to reculminate and everything. And the new bolts I bought are 45 millimeters long, which was plenty long enough for me. Okay, so those are back in. I'd be lying if I said that the mirror cell may be in a different location than it was before. So personally, I don't think it really matters that everything is put back exactly the way. So but I did mark the side, so I'm going to put that back how it was. Okay. Be careful with the screwdriver, you do not want to drop it on the mirror. Okay, so I've got a little bit of wiggle room on all these. So maybe a little too much. Okay, so that's it. That's how you change the bolts out. Having said that, probably already know this, without a star tracker or, you know, an EQ platform, I guess, for one of these, or a giant equatorial mount, you're not going to really get great pictures of, you know, deep space, anything. Like, you know, even at half-second images, you're going to get star trails in them. They're going to be kind of blurry. So the reason I'm doing this is because I've been on a kick lately to try to get ISS transits in front of the sun and the moon. And with a crop sensor camera, the sun and moon frame up perfectly where you don't even really need to crop in on it. The sun and the moon, they fill the whole sensor just about. So this is a perfect focal length. This is a 10-inch Dob. It's 1250 millimeter focal length, and crop sensor camera winds up working out perfect. So that's the reason I'm doing this mainly, is so I can do that. And then I live in Central Florida, so SpaceX is sending up rockets, I think, just about every week. So I'm gonna try to get some close-ups of rocket launches with this. So that's my rationale for doing this. Maybe one day I'll build an EQ platform for it, and then I'll try taking long exposures. But in general, if you're really trying to do astrophotography, these are not the scopes to be doing that with anyways. So yeah, so that's all there is to it. As you see, it's not very difficult. So good luck, and